arthroscopic posterior stabilization and remplissage of a reverse Hill-Sachs lesion using a linked Knotless 2.6 fibre tack construct. In this left shoulder of a patient placed in the lateral decubitus position, the posterior labral tear can be clearly seen. When the arthroscope is introduced through an anterior portal, the reverse Hill-Sachs lesion can be seen. A cannula is inserted through an accessory anterior portal to pass through the deltoid and lie above the subscapularis tendon. A 2.6 knotless fibre tack anchor is inserted through the cannula and positioned at the lower aspect of the lesion. A second anchor is then positioned in a slightly higher position, leaving a tissue bridge between the two. Viewing from the anterior portal, an accessory posterior portal is created and a cannula inserted. The posterior labrum is elevated and the cartilage debrided to a bleeding surface. A 1.8 knotless fibre tack anchor is then passed through the cannula and inserted into the glenoid at the lower end of the lesion. A straight microsuturosue is passed percutaneously through the capsule and then the labrum as separate steps. The nitinol wire is passed into the joint and then retrieved through the cannula. The blue working suture is then loaded into the nitinol wire and pulled through the labrum and capsule. The suture is then retrieved from between the labrum and the capsule. The broad shuttling suture is then retrieved through the initial posterior portal. The working suture is then loaded into the loop of the shuttling suture and pulled through the anchor. By pulling firmly, the suture is then locked in place and the repair completed. The working suture is then retrieved through the cannula and cut flush. The process is then repeated by inserting a second anchor. The microsuturosue is passed through the labrum in the same fashion and the nitinol loop retrieved before the needle is removed. The working suture is then passed into the loop and drawn through the labrum before being retrieved back through the cannula. The broad shuttling suture is retrieved from the primary portal. The working suture is then loaded into the loop of the shuttling suture and pulled through the anchor. By pulling firmly, the suture is locked in place and then it can be retrieved through the cannula before being cut flush. If desired, the process can be repeated with a third anchor in a slightly higher position. Once the posterior repair has been completed, attention can then be returned to the reverse Hill-Sachs lesion. To create the linked mattress construct, take the working suture from the first anchor and load it into the loop of the shuttling suture of the second anchor. Pull on the broad end of the second anchor shuttling suture to draw the working suture through the tendon, through the anchor, and out through the cannula. Take up the excess, but do not tighten this at this stage. Repeat the process by loading the working suture of the second anchor into the shuttle loop of the first anchor. Now pull on the broad end of the shuttling suture, drawing the working suture through the tendon and through the anchor. Take up the excess suture, but do not tighten fully at this stage. Pull sequentially on the two working sutures, drawing the tendon down into the defect and locking the construct. The tendon can be seen to be filling the reverse Hill-Sachs lesion.